Have you ever been so invisible that even your own family seemed to forget you existed? Like you're screaming inside a silent room, desperate to be seen, to be heard, but all your efforts vanish into the background like a whisper lost in the wind? This was my reality for the longest time. My name is Hannah. For years, I lived under a heavy, suffocating weight, the feeling of never being enough. Not for my parents, not for my family, and sometimes, not even for myself. I was the girl who pushed herself beyond limits, who smiled through the pain, who gave everything she had, yet received nothing but cold indifference in return. I want to take you back to those moments, the ones people never talk about. The quiet, lonely moments when you're left alone with your thoughts, and the sting of invisibility sinks in deeper than words can describe. Imagine this: a dimly lit dining room. The soft glow of a single overhead light casting long shadows across a worn wooden table. The air thick with the murmur of conversation, the clinking of cutlery against plates. Laughter bubbles up around the table, warm and vibrant yet for you. It feels distant, unreachable, like a melody you once loved but can no longer hear. You sit there, voice barely above a whisper, trying to catch someone's eye, sharing a small victory from your day, only to be met with vacant stares or hurried glances away. I was there every day. It's a peculiar kind of loneliness, being surrounded by people but feeling utterly alone. The silence that fills your ears so loudly it drowns out your own heartbeat. You begin to wonder, am I invisible? Or am I merely a shadow on the wall? A ghost haunting a house that no longer remembers me? The hardest truth? I wasn't invisible to everyone. Strangers saw me, they saw the smile I forced, the laughter I faked. Friends saw the helpful, upbeat girl they wanted me to be. But at home, the one place where love was supposed to be unconditional, I was perpetually falling short. No matter how many late nights I spent studying, how many chores I completed without complaint, how many silent sacrifices I made, it was never enough. I could feel the disappointment radiating from their looks, the coldness in their words sharper than any blade. There were times I tried to be perfect just to earn a simple nod of approval, a fleeting "well done." But it never came. Instead, I was met with indifference, or worse, subtle reminders that I was lacking, flawed, unworthy. Do you know what that does to a person? To a young girl trying to find her way in the world? It makes you shrink inside. It teaches you to hide your dreams, to silence your emotions, to mask your very self. It teaches you to question if you're worthy of love at all. But here's the thing. I'm still here, still standing. And my story isn't just about pain. It's about the journey from invisibility to becoming someone they couldn't imagine living without. Today, I want to share with you what it's like to live through that invisibility, to fight, to find your voice, and how sometimes the very people who never saw you can end up needing you the most. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy, I hope my story offers a glimmer of hope that there is light beyond the darkness. So let me start by telling you about those early days, the quiet longing, the silent tears, the days when I was just a girl desperately trying to be enough. Looking back now, I can see how those early years carved the shape of my soul, not just the person I was, but the person I was becoming. I was the quiet girl tucked away in the corner of every room, the one who listened more than she spoke. I didn't want to stand out, because standing out often meant inviting disappointment, criticism, or worse, silence. School was my refuge. I was the diligent student who stayed late to finish homework, who buried herself in books and dreams of a life far from the cold walls of home. But at home, those dreams were whispered secrets, things I hid in the deepest chambers of my heart, afraid they weren't good enough to be spoken aloud. My parents weren't cruel in any obvious way. Their love was conditional, wrapped in expectations, bound to achievements, tied to standards I could never quite reach. I remember one afternoon vividly. I'd just come home clutching a test paper, my heart swelling with pride because I had earned an A. I ran to my mother, desperate for a smile, a word of praise, maybe even a hug. Instead, she glanced up briefly, barely meeting my eyes, and said, "That's what you're supposed to do." The simplicity of that moment shattered me in ways I couldn't articulate. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tell her how much it meant to me. But instead, the words caught in my throat. I swallowed my disappointment and told myself, maybe I'm not worth celebrating. Our house wasn't filled with loud arguments or dramatic scenes. It was quiet, too quiet, heavy with unspoken expectations and unmet desires. Family dinners were a blur of muted voices and sidelong glances. Conversations flowed around me, but never to me. I'd sit, picking at my food, pretending to listen while the loneliness crept in, wrapping itself around my chest like a cold, suffocating blanket. Sometimes I'd overhear whispered praises for other kids, their accomplishments, their talents, their bright futures, and I'd wonder bitterly why I was never the subject of those words. Frustration flickered in their eyes, sometimes directed at me, sometimes not. But I absorbed it all as if I were a shadow, a mistake tolerated rather than loved. Perhaps the most painful thing was the silence, the love not spoken aloud, the warmth withheld not through harsh words but through absence of encouragement, of comfort, of acknowledgement. I cried alone, many nights. Quiet tears soaked into my pillow as I wished for someone, anyone, to see me. To truly see me beyond the mistakes, beyond the quiet failures, beyond the invisible walls I felt closing in. As I grew older, the weight of invisibility did not lift. It clung to me, shaping how I saw myself and how I moved through the world. I learned to hide my pain, to wear a brave face, and to hope, just hope that one day, my efforts would be seen. But no matter how many trophies I collected, how many hours I sacrificed, the approval I sought remained elusive, a distant star just beyond reach. That hopeful girl who once dreamed without limits began to doubt. Why am I not enough? What is wrong with me? Became the silent mantra echoing in my mind. This was the quiet, relentless fight I carried into adulthood, a fight not with others, but with myself. And this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would challenge me in ways I could never have imagined, pushing me to confront my fears, my pain, and ultimately, to discover a strength I never knew I had. So, this is where my story truly begins, in the shadows of a childhood filled with longing, loneliness, and silent tears. Stepping into adulthood did not erase the shadows that clung to me. Instead, those shadows grew heavier, deeper, almost unbearable at times. The weight of my past followed me like a silent companion, sometimes whispering doubts, sometimes shouting fears, and I found myself trapped in a relentless internal battle. Every day was a delicate balancing act between the person I was expected to be and the person I longed to become. The expectations from my family loomed over me like storm clouds, darkening the light of my own dreams. Conversations with my parents, which should have been moments of connection, often reopened old wounds. I remember one argument like it was yesterday. It started over something small, a simple disagreement, but quickly spiraled into a flood of painful words. Why can't you be more like your cousin? Always falling short, my father said sharply, his voice cutting through me like a blade. Those words weren't just criticism, they were a condemnation, a verdict that seemed to define my entire existence. I wanted to fight back, to explain that I was trying, that I was more than a mere comparison. But fear gripped me, fear of rejection, of further disappointment, and so I stayed silent. I let those words sink in, corroding my confidence one bitter layer at a time. In those moments, I questioned everything. Was I really the failure they claimed? Was I destined to be the perpetual disappointment? Never good enough? Never enough at all? Loneliness became my shadow. Even surrounded by people, I felt utterly isolated. Friends who once listened began to drift away, perhaps weary of my quiet sadness or unsure how to help. I retreated into myself, burying my pain beneath layers of busyness and routine. Work became a refuge, a place where I could distract myself, where achievements were tangible and measurable. But no matter how hard I worked, how many tasks I completed, the ache within remained, persistent and unyielding. Many nights, I lay awake in the dark, mind racing with self-doubt. I questioned whether I was worthy of love, happiness, or even simple acceptance. The silence of my room was deafening, filled with echoes of harsh words and cold silences from the past. Yet, amid the storm of uncertainty, flickers of resistance sparked within me. Moments when I caught myself thinking, maybe I am enough. Maybe I deserve better. These fragile hopes kept me going, whispering promises of a brighter future. Still, the path was anything but smooth. The tension with my family never fully eased. Each interaction felt like walking on a tightrope, balancing the desperate need to be seen with the fear of rejection. When I tried to open up to share my feelings, the words often caught in my throat. Vulnerability felt like a dangerous risk cone I wasn't sure I was ready to take. The hardest battle was internal clash between hope and fear, strength and fragility. I was learning that healing was not a straight line. Some days were steps forward. Others felt like slipping back into old shadows. But through the loneliness and pain, I found a vital truth. I was not alone. There were others, like me, who felt invisible, unheard, unworthy. Knowing that sparked a quiet but powerful determination to keep moving forward. I sought out stories, people, and moments that offered light stories of resilience, of courage, of healing. I began to believe that my worth was not defined by those who failed to see me, but by my own courage to keep fighting. This internal crucible forged my true self bruised, yes, but unbroken, scarred, but growing stronger. The struggle was far from over, but I was no longer willing to let doubt and loneliness dictate my story. One frigid winter evening, I found myself standing by my bedroom window, gazing at the star-studded sky. The stillness outside was a stark contrast to the tempest swirling inside me, a storm brewed from years of doubt, loneliness, and yearning. Yet amidst that chaos, a fragile but persistent spark ignited a flicker of hope that refused to be snuffed out. I whispered to myself, I can't keep living like this. I'm tired of shrinking to fit into a mold never meant for me. It's time to find my own light, my own voice. That silent vow marked the dawn of a new chapter, though the transformation was anything but immediate. Reclaiming my voice was a slow, arduous process. Each step met with fear, hesitation, and self-doubt. At first, asserting myself felt unnatural, like speaking a foreign language, saying no, setting boundaries, concepts foreign to a girl raised to placate and disappear. Yet, each time I stood firm, I chipped away at the invisible chains that had bound me for so long. The first unashamed no I uttered was liberating and terrifying all at once. It was the moment I realized I could choose for myself rather than live according to others' expectations. Along this journey, I sought out those who saw me, friends who listened without judgment, mentors who nurtured rather than criticized. These relationships became lifelines, reminding me I was not defined by my past or others' perceptions. Setbacks came. Old insecurities resurfaced, and family members resisted my newfound boundaries, accusing me of coldness or ingratitude. Yet, each challenge fortified my resolve. I embraced vulnerability, sharing my fears and pains despite the discomfort. In doing so, I discovered an unexpected strength, a real, profound power rooted in authenticity. I learned to forgive not just those who had hurt me, but myself for past silences and self-doubt. This self-compassion was the salve that began healing wounds long buried. This journey was more than confronting others. It was a reclamation of my buried self. As I spoke my truth and lived authentically, I noticed a shift. Doors once closed creaked open, and voices that ignored me started to listen. Most importantly, I found peace, not perfection, but acceptance of myself. That night by the window was not an end, but a beginning, a transition from merely surviving to truly living. Life, in its unpredictable way, has a habit of flipping everything upside down when you least expect it. Just as I began to believe I was carving out a space for myself, finding my voice, and stepping into the woman I wanted to be, everything shifted. Suddenly, irrevocably. It came on a cold, gray morning. The kind of morning where the air feels thick and heavy, and the world seems to hold its breath. The phone rang, and my mother's voice trembled on the other end, fragile, urgent, almost breaking. A family emergency had struck, one that none of us were prepared for, threatening to tear apart the fragile threads holding us together. In that moment, everything I had endured, the doubts, the silences, the invisible scars, became an unexpected source of strength. I was no longer the overlooked girl who faded into the background. I was the one they turned to, the one they suddenly needed. Without asking for it, I stepped into the role of caretaker, organizer, and steady anchor in a raging storm. I found myself making calls I never thought I'd make, coordinating treatments, calming panicked relatives, and holding space for fears too deep for words. Every task, every decision felt monumental, but I carried them with a quiet determination that surprised even me. It was surreal. The very people who once dismissed me, who barely saw me as enough, now depended on me in ways I never imagined. It was as if the universe had turned inside out, and I was standing at the center, the linchpin holding everything together. There were moments when the weight of responsibility threatened to crush me. I felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and utterly alone despite being surrounded by family. But I reminded myself that this was my memento proof that the girl who was never enough was, in fact, indispensable. Yet, this sudden reversal brought a complicated mix of emotions. Alongside the pride and strength, resentment flickered a quiet question that haunted me. How had it taken a crisis for them to finally see me? Was their need born from genuine recognition or desperation? I saw cracks in the facade of their dependence. Some family members embraced me with genuine gratitude and warmth. Others offered silent skepticism or uncomfortable distance, as if struggling to accept the new reality. But no matter their reactions, the dynamic had undeniably changed. I was no longer invisible. I had become the cornerstone. This twist-a-sharp turn in the story I thought I knew was both a blessing and a challenge. It forced me to confront not only their past neglect, but also my own evolving sense of power, worth, and belonging. As I navigated this new reality, I learned that true strength isn't just about being needed. It's about how you protect and hold your own heart amidst shifting demands and old wounds. This chapter was an emotional whirlwind, a collision of past pain and new responsibility. It was the moment I stepped fully into my power, even as I carried scars from years of invisibility. The family crisis became a catalyst for transformation, not just for them, but for me. It marked the point where I stopped running from my past and began to rewrite my story on my own terms. When the immediate crisis finally passed, I had hoped for relief, for a sense of peace after the storm. But healing, as I soon learned, was a far more complicated journey than I ever imagined. The sudden shift in family dynamics had left us all unsettled, and I was no exception. I was no longer the invisible daughter, the forgotten one, quietly bending to the will of others. Now, I was the one the family depended on, the one they turned to for strength and guidance. But with that newfound role came new tensions, unspoken expectations, and old resentments that refused to fade away quietly. Some family members embraced the change, expressing gratitude and support. Others, however, seemed wary or even resentful, struggling to accept the shift in power. The same people who once dismissed me now looked at me with a mixture of need and suspicion. The delicate balance of relationships was fragile, as if walking on a tightrope where any misstep could shatter years of fragile peace. Navigating this new reality was exhausting. I found myself constantly negotiating how much to assert my voice without pushing loved ones away. It was a constant push and pull between standing firm in my worth and seeking connection with people who had long struggled to see me. Inside, I was a whirlwind of emotions. Pride at how far I'd come clashed with moments of self-doubt. Sometimes, I wondered if I was merely filling a void left by circumstance, a temporary fix until the family could find their footing again. Was their dependence born from genuine respect or just desperation? The wounds of my past did not simply disappear. Years of feeling unseen and unheard had left scars that sometimes flared up unexpectedly, triggered by a glance, a word, or even a silence. Those scars reminded me how deeply the pain had embedded itself within me. Forgiveness became essential, not just forgiving my family for their past neglect, but forgiving myself for carrying pain and for the times I doubted my own worth. I learned that healing isn't a straight line. It is a winding road filled with small victories and setbacks, moments of clarity and moments of confusion. Rebuilding trust meant embracing honesty, even when it was painful. I began to share the hurt I'd carried for so long, voicing feelings I had buried deep inside. These conversations were difficult. They opened old wounds but also began to mend them. Slowly, walls began to crumble. Fragile bridges formed where there had been distance and silence. These connections weren't perfect, far from it, but they were real, and that made all the difference. Through this process, I discovered a new kind of strength, not the unyielding toughness I once thought I needed, but a strength rooted in vulnerability and authenticity. I learned that being strong meant allowing myself to be seen fully with all my flaws, scars, and imperfections. Setting boundaries became an act of self-love. Saying no was no longer an act of rebellion, but a declaration of my worth and a way to protect my peace amid the complexities of family life. This season of healing transformed me. I grew more compassionate not only toward others but also toward myself. I found resilience, not in silent endurance, but in facing pain with courage and grace. The journey ahead was still uncertain. The past would always be a part of me, but I was no longer afraid. I had found the strength to face my history and to shape a future where I could be both seen and heard, where my worth was no longer defined by others. This was the true power of the twist, not just that they needed me, but that I learned to need myself. As I stand here today, reflecting on the winding path that has brought me from silence to strength, from invisibility to presence, I can say with a full heart I am no longer the girl who felt unseen and not enough. I am Hannah, woman who has learned to own her worth, embrace her imperfections, and live authentically, unapologetically, on her own terms. The journey to this place has been anything but easy. It was strewn with setbacks, doubts, and moments where I questioned if the light at the end of the tunnel was real or just another mirage. But through every twist and turn, every quiet tear, and every hard-earned smile, I discovered something precious: myself. Being enough is not about meeting someone else's expectations or fitting into a mold carved out by others. It's about accepting who I am. Flaws, scars, strengths, and knowing my value is not contingent upon external approval. That realization was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time, I stopped seeking permission to be myself. I began to speak kindly to my own inner voice, protect my peace fiercely, and nurture a relationship with myself, grounded in compassion and respect. Looking back, I see how much growth was seeded in those early years of pain. Every hardship, every moment of loneliness, and every difficult conversation became a stepping stone shaping the woman I am today. They taught me resilience, compassion, and the transformative power of hope. My relationships with my family have evolved as well. They are not perfect old wounds, sometimes ache and scars, sometimes sting, but there is a new foundation, built on honesty, forgiveness, and mutual respect. Most importantly, I have learned to surround myself with people who truly see me. People who celebrate not just the person I appear to be, but the complex, beautiful woman I have become. If you have ever felt invisible, unheard, or unworthy, please know this: your worth is intrinsic. It does not depend on others' recognition or validation. Your light is within you, waiting to be claimed and nurtured. Your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. I hope my journey offers a glimmer of hope that it's never too late to reclaim your worth, to speak your truth, and to live a life that feels deeply authentic to you. So, what comes next? For me, it's continuing to grow, to heal, and to embrace the freedom that comes with being fully myself. It's about living boldly, loving deeply, and never forgetting the girl who fought so hard just to be seen. Thank you for listening to my story. If it has touched you, I invite you to share your own journey, your struggles, your triumphs. Together, we can create a space of healing, empowerment, and connection. And if this story resonated, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, you are enough. You have always been, and you always will be.